Brandon, and we're in Houston, the Houston reunion, and it's September the 11th, 1998, and I'm with Joseph Hollerbach, and I'll let you introduce yourself, tell where you were and who you
All
were.
right. My friends know me as Joe rather than Joseph, and I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota in 1921. Have a wife and 2 children. The boy is 41. The girl is 38. Have 2 grandchildren. The boy is one boy is 6 and the other one is 2.5. And naturally, the 6-year-old just started school, and the 2.5 is going to preschool this winter. I have 4 sisters and 3 brothers, and in the house where we lived, naturally, only had 4 bedrooms, so we were a little crowded, and we had a nice yard. We played in the sandbox in the backyard and played baseball in the front yard, and the outfielders had to go in the street. I got to play a lot of ball because I was the only one who had a ball. This was, say, 1935, 36. My dad made good money. He was a printer and made $43 a week. He was unemployed from 32 to 38. And we had to go on welfare. I was notified that I would go in the Army in October of 1942, and I went in on my 21st birthday. I was 26th of October, and I ended up at Camp Campbell on the 1st of November, 1942.
I'm sorry, this noise outside's gonna pick up. Can we wait for a second?
When I went into the Army, I worked for the Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company. I was a machine operator, and they just started to have women operate the machine. So I just set up the machines and adjusted the stroke. And typical Army fashion, you know, they put the round forms in the square holes and the square holes in the round forms. So anyway, I had a little bit of supervisory experience, and while we were supposed to be taking basic training, I was one of the few guys that knew how to drive a car. So my job was to take trainees out and teach them how to drive a Jeep, how to use a shift.
And where was this at?
I was assigned to Company E of the 44th Armored Regiment in the 12th Armored Division at Camp Campbell, Kentucky. And,
it was in Camp Campbell.
Yeah.
I wanted to clarify.
Because I only stayed with the division until March of 1943, and I was sent to Ohio State University under the ASTP, Army Specialized Training Program, and I spent a year up there, met my wife, and then when that program was discontinued in March of 1944, I was sent to the 14th Armored Division, back at Camp Campbell. A few weeks later, I was appointed to go to the Officer Candidate School at Fort Benning.
So, how did you sign up to go to the ASTP, or did they just offer it to
Well,
you?
they, when you go in the Army, they give you a test called the Army General Classification Test. That's supposed to determine what kind of a job you get. Like I said, you go round into the square. But anyhow, later on, those of us that had high school degrees and had a certain qualification on the AGCT were given another test by a group of college professors, and this was kind of like an intelligence test, or to find out how much math and how much grammar and whether you knew any foreign language. And it was kind of a general education test, and you had to get 125 to go to ASTP. So I qualified and was sent up to Ohio State. Matter of fact, a guy by the name of Charlie McVeigh is in the 495th, and we were classmates. I don't recall. I think when he left ASTP, he must have went to the 495th. So.
Can I ask you a few questions about the ASTP there in Ohio State? You were classmates with Charlie McVeigh.
Yeah.
And what did y'all study? What did you do?
Well, the ASTP was basically divided into 3 areas. I was studying mechanical engineering. Some students were civil engineers, and a lot of them were either doctors or dentists. So that was the 3 major classifications that they had. And we went to school Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, and study hall from 7 to 9, except Friday night you had off, Saturday night you had off. And you had to be back Sunday afternoon at 5 o'clock for supper, and 7 to 9 study hall Sunday night. And then we also had class Saturday morning from 8 o'clock to 12, 54 hours a week of school. But we had work time too in that time. Then we had maybe 6 hours of physical training in that time. So you were plenty busy. So in the year that I was there, I completed 2 years of college.
That's quite a bit.
So I guess that's what you call force feed.
Yeah. How did you found out that you were going back to Camp Campbell, and I guess whenever they dissolved the ASTP program, so you didn't know, everyone just went to different places?
That's right.
Correct?
A lot of the classmates from all, well, I don't remember, there must have been 55,000 men in that ASTP going to school at the time in Texas A&M and Kentucky and Ohio State. They have an Ohio University down in Athens. A lot of the, they're having the ASTP lunch at 1 o'clock today. If you have time to come in and listen, there'll be guys talking about it there. But like I say, a lot of them went right from Ohio State and from other schools straight to the 12th Armored Division. Some of them, a lot of them joined the 12th Armored Division after it was in combat. But since I went off to Fort Benning to Officer Candidate School, that was the last I saw of the 12th Armored. I was out at Camp Roberts, California, in an infantry replacement training center. Then I went to the Philippines right after the bomb was dropped. And I was over there for about 9 months, came home, was discharged at Camp Atterbury, and they had a program where I could take my wife back to the Philippines. And then I signed up again, and we stayed in, went to the Philippines, and we got home in I think it was July of 1949 when we got home from the Philippines. And when I was ready to get out, the Korean War started, and they wouldn't let us out. So luckily I got sent to Germany. And I spent 3 years over there, played baseball, and then I ran the athletic program for the 12th Artillery Group in Karlsruhe, Germany. I ran all of the physical training program. I was classified as an assistant S3, which is a training officer, and I had about 6,000 men that played baseball, played softball, played basketball, had 4 boxing teams, and I was the coordinator.
How did you get that job? What led you to that position?
Well, basically, I started in the Philippines. I organized a baseball league over there. I've had 4 Army teams, 2 Air Force teams, and 1 Navy team, and Douglas MacArthur had 2 of his crews from the stevedores in the Manila Harbor. They had baseball teams, so we traveled around to Luzon Island to the different bases and to Manila to play ball on Sunday afternoon. And then when I got to Germany, they found out that I had done that in the Philippines, so I got to do it again.
That's wonderful. I'm very interested in sports and
Well, and you see, even though the Korean War was going on, why Eisenhower was chief of staff, and he was also chief of, I can't remember, someplace in Germany, and he was interested in sports, and plus he wanted to keep the men busy, and that's why we had all those athletics. It was a high, intense effort. It both was good physical training, and it was a morale booster.
yeah.
And, so in 1954, when I came home from Germany, I was sent as a company commander up to Camp Lucas in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and I had a gun with a radar and a computer on it. I never saw the thing before, so I had to depend on the non-coms. So it worked out good. Those technicians, they knew how to control the gun and how to work it and how to train the men. And I just did the typical company commander duties, sign the morning report and go get a cup of coffee. And in 1956, I was sent to Japan. I had another company over there, same kind of, it was called a skyscraper, 75 millimeter gun with a radar and computer. And we learned one thing, that the computer was very sensitive and that the radar was very sensitive. And each one of those units was about the size of a small refrigerator. So when we moved the guns, we took these units out of the gun and put them in a 3/4 ton truck on some mattresses. And if you kept them cushioned like that, when you got to your destination, you could slide them back in the gun. And it didn't take much time, maybe a half hour, an hour, to readjust them, and they were ready to go again. But if you left them in the gun, that over the road would shake them all to pieces. And I was in Japan then until 1959. My son was born there in 57. And when we took my wife to the hospital, why, they didn't have any nurses. So I spent the night with her. And the boy was born at 9 in the morning. That might have been the beginning of the system they got today. With husbands with their wife.
Yeah, that was very unusual. That didn't happen.
Yeah, because they didn't have enough nurses. And so he was born in Misawa, Japan. And when we came home in '59, I was sent back to Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan at Camp Lucas with another anti-aircraft artillery unit, same kind of weapons. But I was, at first I was the S2, the security and intelligence officer. And at the end I was S4, the supply officer. Then I was sent to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Again, I was S2 security officer with a Nike missile unit. We had 2 battalions of Army men there and 1 battalion of National Guard. And we were training them to handle the missiles. Our security forces had dogs, and my job was to see to it that the security people were on alert and that the dogs were trained and fed. While I was at Milwaukee, I completed the 20 years and retired in 1963.
What did you do after that? What business did you go into after '63?
Well, first I tried professional bowling. I bowled with Andy Verpapa and Steve Nagy and Dick Weber, but I never won. So after a little while, I had taken a test for a research analyst in the state of Minnesota, and I was called up there, got a job as a research analyst, and was retrained from the missile experience and the computer experience into systems. And I, from 1968 to 1986, I worked for the state of Minnesota, the systems information and design and preparation of federal reports. So, and I retired in October of 1986 on my 65th birthday about, and I've been retired since.
That's wonderful.
So did a little fishing afterward, still trying to clean up and fix the house. Never gets done. And did a lot of traveling. We've been to every state capital, and however, Hawaii wasn't a state when we were there. In 1988, we drove up the Alcan Highway to Alaska, and took a charter flight from Haines City to Juneau to get to the capital. And we went on the glaciers and so forth. And then we drove down to Anchorage, Alaska, and stayed there a couple days. And there's a new road, I can't remember the name of it, but it comes down into Idaho. Instead of coming back down the highway where we took the new road, and visited Army people that we knew living in Idaho, and we've visited them in California, all over the country.
questions going back to 42. Whenever you helped to form the 12th Armored Division, or
No, I was a recruit.
you were
Yeah, these people on the order, they were the cadre. So like I said, Sergeant Cassidon was our platoon sergeant. But since I was one of the few people that knew how to drive a car with a shift, I spent my time teaching other men how to drive Jeeps. And I did a little, I drove a tank a few times. Wasn't my normal assignment. Most of the time on the tank crew I was a radio operator. And I was, like I say, I was there from October of 42 to March of 43. And I didn't find out about this 12th Armored Division Association until 1988, when I went up to visit the North Central chapter meeting in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. And then the next time I took my wife with me, we went to Mankato. And we've been to a number of, let's see, I think we've been to about 6 national conventions now. Omaha, St. Louis, Fort Knox, Columbus, Ohio, and here. So.
What do you remember about Camp Campbell?
Mud. It would rain that winter, and you'd go out there and do your about face and right face and left face, and your mud would come up to your ankles. Then they'd tell you you're done with close order drill. Go to the barracks and get on your dry shoes and clean off the ones you got, put them under your bed so they dry out for tomorrow. Each guy had 2 pair of shoes. And then they'd go inspect the barracks and gig you because the shoes were dirty. The other thing that I'm sure the guys will remember was the Inspector General came through, and one of the characters had a dental mirror. And he'd go around all the toilet bowls and look at the underneath side of it, and if there was any indication of rust or any kind of lime or anything in there, that's what you got when you went on special duty. For if you got a Article 15, you had to go and take a toothbrush and clean out all the toilet bowls. And hope that the next time the guy came around with the little mirror, it would be clean.
Oh my goodness, I haven't heard that before. So,
But I was lucky I didn't get to do that.
I was about to ask if you ever had to do that.
No, I didn't get to do that. I got to do a couple of 6 Sundays of KP because I didn't come back for when I was supposed to come back.
What happened there?
Oh, I just was on vacation or on leave, and I couldn't understand why I should go back on Good Friday night, so I didn't go back until Easter Monday morning. And so the company commander just said, well, we'll straighten you out. You'll be the kitchen police for the next 6 Sundays. And, you know, that's the thing you never wanted, was everybody was on rotation to do kitchen police. But you didn't want to always do it on Sunday. They had 2 rosters. One was a weekday roster, and you'd get KP maybe once a week or every 2 weeks, and Sunday about every month or 2 months. But when you get 6 Sundays in a row, that was a break for the other guys. They just didn't get called up for a couple of weeks. And, now, we want to talk about some other things. I really didn't go into all of the stuff that's on here. I should tell you one other thing is that there were 3 other guys that hung around with at Ohio State University, and I don't remember which one it was, but before we got to Ohio State, this guy was stationed in Tyler, Texas. Whatever base was down there, I don't remember. It was a dry community, so he and his buddies took a suitcase and went over to visit his brother at an Air Force base where they filled it up with whiskey, and got out on the highway to hitch a ride back, and the sheriff picked them up.
Oh no.
He took them front of the base, left them off, and they walked in.
They didn't get caught.
No, nothing was said. They took the whole suitcase full of whiskey into the camp. So, those are the kind of things soldiers did. And you know, if you hadn't heard it, the good old non-coms would tell you, you can do anything you want to do, just don't get caught. And that's the way the organizations ran those days.
And what else did you want to talk about?
Well, like I said earlier, I left the division early in March of 1943, and since I had some computer experience, I go to the county library and I hook up on the internet where you can search almost anything you want to search. It doesn't give you all the detail you want, but it gets you a lot of names and addresses and telephone numbers and so forth. So I've pulled out information on the 12th Armored Division, which was written by at Abilene. Basically, it's Nicanor, ACU period ADU / academic / history / 12th AD / and that brings this stuff forward. And one of the things that struck my interest was the article by George Hatt, where he pointed out the background of the division, and he referred to the reorganization in November of 1943, where the regiments were disbanded and they made battalions. Basically, I better take the second page where it tells you this. The 43rd Armored Regiment, without the 1st Battalion and the 3rd Battalion, plus the band and the service company and some selected units, were made into the 43rd Tank Battalion. The 44th Armored Regiment, less the 3rd Battalion, the band, and the maintenance company, service company, and recon, made into the 44th Tank Battalion. The 3rd Battalion of the 43rd was a nucleus for the 23rd Tank Battalion, and the 3rd Battalion of the 44th Armored Regiment was a nucleus for the 714th Tank Battalion. Now there's a whole bunch of detail here about how different things were, old organizations and new organizations. That's in General Order number 36, dated 11 November 1943, from headquarters, 12th Armored Division. And apparently this was signed by, it was ordered by Major General Brewer and signed by John L. Ryan Jr., Colonel, General Staff Corps Chief of Staff. That's how the orders were cut in those days. And then I have one other order here, which was cut by the 44th Tank Battalion, General Order number 1, indicating the activation of the 44th Tank Battalion and the appointment of staff officers. Major Barksdale was the executive officer, Captain Kirtle was the adjutant, Captain Cloud was the S2 or intelligence officer, Major Meredith was the plans and training officer, and First Lieutenant McKim was supply officer. That order was also cut on the 11th of November 1943 but that was by the 44th Tank Battalion. Now, the way you get this information is to write a letter to the Center for Military History at College Park, Maryland. This particular location gives you information on Army records, unit records, and that's where you would find this kind of things. I found out also from correspondence with the Center on Military History that if you want rosters or morning reports, you have to request them from St. Louis, Missouri. Now, I have asked for some regimental and some battalion records, like unit rosters and morning reports, sometime between the 5th of November and the end of November 1943, but St. Louis has not responded yet. Back in 1991, I filled out a Form 180, which you can get from your local Veterans Administration office, and you put down what you're trying to do. And I did get a complete history of all my assignments from October of 1942 to the 19th of April 1945, and that was the enlisted service that I had, because on the 19th of April I received my commission. Someplace they have my records for the Army, for the officer period, but I've never tried to recover them. I don't know if I will. And I don't know, I suppose I should mention it, but Steve Cheka lives in Potomac, Maryland, and he's done this work for Ken Bradstreet before. He never zeroed in on this particular bit of information because I don't think it was identified until George Hatt put it in the Abilene records. But he did find a roster of the cadre from Company E of the 44th Armored Regiment, and I'm going to meet later with him this afternoon and find out what other information he has. I don't know how much interest the historical group has on this particular period of time, if it's significant to the history of the division.
It is.
Because most of what I read is in relation to the maneuvers and the combat service in Germany.
We are very interested in this. It's something that we need to find out more information about, so very helpful.
I notice in the summary that's in the brochure that's passed out, it says here that the division liberated 5 concentration camps in near Landsberg prison, where Adolf Hitler wrote Mein Kampf. And then they also have the flag at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. A lot of the information that's being developed is about both the history of the battles plus the opening of the camps in Germany. Plus another, if you look at the history of the 44th Regiment, which I think is written in that Abilene history, they tell about the work of the 44th Battalion at Santo Tomas in the Philippines. And that's why I say most of the information I've seen is related to either maneuvers or battle history. But I was just interested. It looks to me like, since I was in Company E of the 44th Armored Regiment, I would have been transferred to some unit in the 44th Battalion.
Mm-hmm.
And
they went to the Pacific.
yeah. And it's amazing because when I was in the Philippines in 1946 and 47, I worked for an ordnance, first an ordnance ammunition company, and another time for an ordnance maintenance company. And we ran depots in the on Luzon. And I know that there was acres of tanks in that ordnance depot, but I happened to select a Marine personnel mover, which was a tracked vehicle, and took it up to the company, and we used it for recreation. I also rebuilt a Jeep out of the salvage yard, and I traded it to a Navy officer for a boat. So our company had a boat belonged to a captain of an APA, and that APA, I think, stood for Advanced Personnel Assault. The other boats on the or ships on the there were LSTs, where you could actually put a tank on them. They'd run them up to shore and drop the front end of the ship, and the tanks would drive out into the land. And they used those for platoons also. When they did an assault on the island, or when they did the assault at D-Day, why they ran those little ships, maybe with anywhere from 50 to 100 men on them, up against the shore. Hopefully they would drop the front end of it, and it would only be waist deep when you stepped into the water. There were other times when they hit the rocks or sandbars or something, and the guy took 2 steps and the water was over his head. But that's the way it went. I haven't seen this new picture, Finding David Ryan. Is that have you seen that yet?
Finding Private Ryan.
Private Ryan?
Private Ryan.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. But I can imagine it'd probably be very much like the things that happened. Luckily, I never had to participate in them. Trained a lot, but I didn't have to go there and get shot at.
Yeah, well, it's a very moving picture.
But I think, like everyone else, after I retired in 1986, I've worked with our local community planning systems. You take your experience and help them write projects for playgrounds or for house rehabilitation. We're so darn mixed up in our neighborhood now, it's pathetic. Some outfit is trying to make a East 7th Street business development, and I don't know, it seems that you get a piece of property prepared for a project and somebody else buys it and does something else with it, so the project gets set back about another 2 years. And but you're trying to do everything without any money.
And that's difficult. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think that pretty well covers the sort of thing. The only other thing is for the college, what I have written to Dr. Williams is in history teaching, you have to look at a lot more than the division, because you go back to the Industrial Revolution of 1890 to 1910, and then I've lived through the cars and the airplanes and the missiles. I think it's education is so broad. the history of the problems with Germany, the concentration camps, and those are not the only abuses. So I don't know how they were going to tie that into a course in a college. Students are going to have to pick something that they want to study. You know that there's a big effort now to say that the problems with the Jews and the Germans and the killings that happened never did exist, that was all military propaganda. But I think we have to apply that to every type of abuse. I don't know how it's ever going to work out, but the question is, are the people that are living today going to see what we saw? to go from the horses and the cars and the airplanes. Quite a history. Now you want to rewind it and we'll watch it? No, you don't have the screen here, do you?